Hello and welcome, and this is Peter. Thank you very much for dropping by my blog post today, gentlemen. I really appreciate you dropping by. I really appreciate your time and attention, so thank you very much for that. Today's blog post is really just a response to a seminar that I was on last week, and it's kind of disappointing to see seminars like this. And so I'm going to do a couple of videos in response to portions of that seminar, because that seminar was kind of symptomatic of what's going on in the business intelligence area, right? So that's why I'm making this blog post, and I've decided to make available a piece of the BI4ALL base models. Okay, so what has got my bee in my bonnet about said seminar? And I'm not going to say who it was, etc., etc. I don't think there's any point in giving feedback that sounds critical in the public. So I'll just say there are a number of things said in the seminar that I was just like, my goodness, are we still talking about this in public? It's been 30 years, right? Now, for those of you who don't know, you can go by my blog. But I've been in BI next month, in April. I will have been in BI for 30 years. And I can tell you, 30 years ago, we didn't have much of a clue about what it was that we were doing. Today, might sound a little big-headed. I would rate myself pretty easily in the top 20 worldwide of guys who know how to build large data warehouses. Okay? I'd rate myself in the top 20. Now, I'm a little rusty of late, and there's a reason for that. But I'd still rate myself in the top 20. And I've built data warehouses for some of the largest companies in the world over an extended period of time. I really did get right into the whole modeling area, the design and building of very large data models for large corporations, mostly telcos, right? I did a lot of telcos. And the reason, gentlemen, I did a lot of telcos is in the late 90s through to 2011, telcos had the most money. It's that simple, gentlemen. Telcos in that period, late 90s to 2011, when I became less active, telcos had the most money. So I had a wife and 4 children, so I made a beeline for the telcos because they had the most money. Okay? It's as simple as that. So a lot of my data warehouses were in telcos and telco-sized volumes in the late 90s and zeros. And we all know that in the late 90s and zeros, telcos had the most data. Now, IoT has more data, but there's not as many real applications in terms of business benefit for IoT as there was in terms of telco revenue assurance, for example, right? So anyhow, all that aside, I'd rate myself pretty well. Okay? I would rate myself pretty well. I sold many multi-million-dollar data warehouse projects to many billion-dollar companies. If somebody can tell me something I don't already know, I'm really impressed. Okay? So I just want to put that at the front of this series of videos. I just want to put right up front, when somebody in the BI area tells me something I didn't already know, I'm really impressed. Okay? I'm really impressed. And of course, across those 30 years, there's been plenty of men who've told me something that I didn't already know. Because, 30 years ago, I literally had no clue what I was doing on my first project. Oh, it was a disaster from here to breakfast time, I can assure you. Right? But gentlemen, in this seminar that I saw, I'm not meaning to pick on them, because I'm sure other companies are doing similar seminars saying similar things. It's like, we're not winning. It's really like we're not winning. We're talking about things that were dated 20 years ago. Like really, things were talked about in that seminar that I haven't done for 27 years. Like really, that I haven't done since 1993. They're still talking about doing the same thing. It's like, why are we talking about doing the same thing that we realized was a bad way to do things 27 years ago? Why are we still talking about this? It's specifically when guys like Ralph and I were out talking about how to do things better so much in the 90s. So gentlemen, we're really not winning. If anybody would like help on their data warehousing project, on their BI project, by all means, hire me. I'll give you the help that you need. Okay? And I'm cheap today. Currently I'm not charging the $200 an hour like I used to. I'm pretty cheap now. Okay? So if you need some help on your data warehouse project, BI project, by all means hire me. I'm available. I'll help you out if you pay me. Okay? So one of the comments in this discussion, this seminar, was, getting user requirements on agile sprints in order to figure out what tables to develop. Right? The presenter talked about we need to do business interviews and business requirements documents in order to understand what data needs to be put into the data warehouse and what reports need to be built and things like that. And gentlemen, I haven't done that since 1993. Like really, I haven't done that since 1993. I haven't gone to a business user and asked him about what data do you need in the data warehouse since 1993. Okay? That's 28 years. It's been 28 years since I used the process of what we need to do is find out what operational data you've got, and we need to go talk to the business people, and we need to figure out what data do they need in the data warehouse to support the decision-making process they want. We gave that up in 1993 as a bad idea. Okay? And I've got the story of Qantas Cargo out on my website for how, people complained about me. People used to complain about me, gentlemen, when I didn't ask them those questions and say, well, you're not asking the same questions as everybody else is asking. So I did Qantas Cargo in 2000, and in 2000 I got complaints from the senior management of Qantas Cargo that I was not asking them about what data do they need on their reports. I used to get complaints about that because it used to be so standard by everybody else. And here we are in 2021, and on a seminar, somebody says we need to go do business requirements analysis with the business users to understand what data they need to put onto their reports and what their reports should look like and what we need to put into the data warehouse and things like that. We haven't done it for... I haven't done that for 28 years. And I was getting complaints about not doing it 21 years ago. Okay? So, I'd like to present it with a little bit of humor, but if you stop and think about it, here's someone doing a seminar in 2021 claiming to be an experienced consultant, talking about doing something that we knew was a bad idea 28 years ago. We knew there was a better way to do it 28 years ago. Oh, by the way, it's published, it's on my website, it's in the methodology. You can go read it, go download it and get it for free. Okay? I'm now putting out a lot of stuff for free. So, having said that, what is it we do now? Okay, what were the milestones and what is it we do? Well, the big milestone was I went to the Metaphor Users Conference in September 1993, and I sat down and I talked with some of the people about how they run their projects, and they very kindly gave me a copy of their methodology, particularly their interview methodology. And I read their interview methodology and I went, oh my goodness, I'm a complete idiot. This is so much better. And, I holus bolus copied their interview methodology because they were an IBM-owned company. Okay? And that interview methodology from 1993 is now, with obviously there's been development over the years, but with changes, it's in the methodology published for free on my website. You can go download it. And if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it. So what do? We go and ask people what their vision of outstanding success would be. I started doing that personally in 1993. Now what was the next big change? The next big change was in 2001, I went and started working for Sean Kelly in Sybase. He was the VP for Sybase EMEA, Business Intelligence, in 2001. So I went and started working for Sean because a buddy of mine had told me, wow, these guys have got a set of models. You should see the models these guys have got. You have to come and work for Sean because we are the leading group in the world. And the guy who told me that, I won't say his name because he doesn't want his name splashed all around the place, but the guy who told me that was the best banking data warehouse consultant I'd ever met in my life. So the people who know me know who he is, right? So the guy who told me Sean Kelly and Sybase have got the #1 suite of models in the world, and you should go work there, Pete, because you will learn a lot if you go work for Sean Kelly. The guy who told me that was the best banking data warehouse guy in the world, bar none. Okay? So I took his word for it. Okay, call him Fred. I took Fred's word for it. I relocated to Ireland. I signed up and I went to work for Sean Kelly. And I went off to the training, the Sybase training for data models. They were called the Industry Warehouse Studio models. I went off for the training and I did the 3 days of training and I met the man who designed them. And after 2 days, I was like, holy cow, this is the future of data warehousing. My goodness, these guys have invented the future. My goodness. And they did, by the way, gentlemen, they had invented the future. These two guys, Sean Kelly being one, and the other guy who also doesn't like his name splattered around, those two guys had invented the future and they'd sold their data models to Sybase and they were selling them like hotcakes. And they were selling them like hotcakes for good reason. And I was like, holy cow, these are the best ideas I've ever seen. Like, really. And it was a generational advance on what Ralph and Bill had been talking about. And so, gentlemen, that was in February 2001. I did that 3-day class. And I have worked on those models and evolutions of those models since that time. That's 20 years. Okay, it's just past 20 years that I first saw those data models in a class. And gentlemen, in the 20 years I've been working with those models and the techniques for building those models, I have personally managed to make one contribution. Okay? In 20 years, I've managed to come up with one new idea that didn't exist. Not as in terms of tables, but one new design technique that didn't exist when I was shown the models in February 2001. Now, gentlemen, I would argue that if someone like me, okay, who I consider pretty damn good at data modeling, data warehouse data modeling, if someone like me can work with a set of models for 20 years and rack my brain over improvements to make to these models for 20 years, and in a 20-year period come up with only one new idea in a design technique, you can be pretty sure they're pretty damn good models, right? By the way, that one idea I came up with, it actually came up, the guy who was the inventor of the models, the guy who designed them in the first place, he and I were working together on a project. And these models were very complicated, and we used to have pictures of the models all over the walls. So anyhow, we were working on this project, and we were working in a conference room. We had a conference room dedicated to us to work on this project, and we had the walls literally plastered with the diagrams of all the data models for this project. But as happens, for some reason, I don't know what it was, looking back, we got kicked out of our conference room and kicked into the open office space. And we didn't have wall space to put pictures of our models. And the guy I was working with, this is 2002, the guy I was working with, call him Fred. Fred was getting on a little bit 20 years ago, and he said, you know, Pete, I'm getting on. I'm having trouble remembering the models. Like without the pictures on the wall, I can't hold all the models in pictures in my head. And, you know, I guess I'm just getting old, he says to me one day. And I said, well, you know, Fred, what we need is a way of designing models where we don't have to remember what they look like. You know, we shouldn't need pictures. And we're actually having dinner, right? And he laughed at me and said, well, that'd be good for us old guys, wouldn't it? Not having to remember what they look like. But yeah, right. Like we're going to invent a way of managing models where we don't have to remember what they look like. That was kind of the conversation. And I'm like, yeah, well, it'd be pretty good innovation, wouldn't it? Not having to remember what the models look like. Well, gentlemen, that night, in the middle of the night, while I was asleep, my brain worked it out, and I had an idea, and I woke up, and I used to have a paper notepad next to my bed, and I wrote it down, and I took it to Fred in the morning at breakfast at the hotel, and I said, what do you think about this idea, Fred? And he goes, well done. That's a good idea. And he was more than 20 years older than me. And when he said to me, well done, that's a good idea, I took that as one of the biggest professional compliments I ever got in my lifetime, right? Because he hadn't thought of it, I thought of it, and we added it to the models. And he was like, wow, that's a good idea. And that idea that I added, that made us millions, that made Sybase millions of dollars, made me personally hundreds of thousands of dollars. That one idea. And that one idea is public. And I'll actually show you that idea in this presentation, okay? In this blog post. And you can see that in blog posts I'm doing them far more formally than a formal seminar or formal presentation, okay? So once we had those models, what was the next big step? What was the next big step we took? That was, I was introduced to them in 2001, but we'd already put them into more, Sean and his buddies had already put them into more than 50 or 60 companies, and literally we didn't have enough people to install these things. Like, we couldn't install them. We had customers lined up. Like, when can you come and do our data warehouse project? We'd really like it done, please. We paid you for everything. Please show up and do our data warehouse project. It was like that. We had a queue. And we're like, I'm like, holy cow, we've got a queue of customers lined up. And in Australia, I used to have to work so hard to win deals. Now I've come to Europe, and we've got a queue. If we could get more people, we could just do more projects. Now that was before 9/11, and after 9/11 it was a little bit different, right? But the next thing we invented is another thing that's now freely available for me, and that is CTL. The next thing we invented was, we've got the models, we know how to build these things, but the building of the ETL is a little bit time consuming and complicated. So I wrote a new generation of my pre-existing COBOL ETL tool, and voila! Now we could implement these models very, very cheaply. And we were using Sybase IQ, and what does Sybase IQ do? Gets you 80% compression. So disk was no longer an issue. Okay? So for example, if you had 1 terabyte of raw data, to put it into Oracle, you would need 8 terabytes of disk, and to put it into Sybase IQ, you would only need 200 gigabytes of disk. So when we were selling these Sybase IWS models, disk was not an issue. Volume of disk was not an issue. And Sybase was selling it at $50,000 per CPU, and it ran about 100 times faster than Oracle. So CPU database cost wasn't much of an issue either. On a 4-core Pentium Pro or high-end Pentium at the time, you could run a data warehouse that you couldn't run on a 16-core Oracle system. And you had literally nearly 20 times less space, like 8 terabytes to 200 gigs ratio. So what did we do? If you stop and think about that environment, gentlemen, where the database license isn't costing you much, the disk isn't costing you much because you're using 1/16th of the disk you're using for Oracle, the consulting services isn't costing you much because you've got an ETL tool that builds the ETL relatively quickly, and we were selling the data models for $150,000 per copy back then. So what would you do in that environment? Well, I'll tell you what you did. You put everything into the data warehouse. You didn't leave anything behind, as much as you could. Okay? That's what you did. You put everything into the data warehouse. So by 2003, when I went and did Saudi Telecom on behalf of Sybase, Saudi Telecom was my customer, and we were having the conversation, what do you take from the telco billing systems and put into we were doing an operational data store, what do you put into the operational data store? The answer was everything. And they were like, no, you have to do requirements gathering and you have to understand our needs and blah, 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 blah. And we went, no, we'll take everything and we'll put it in the operational data store. And you'll have everything. Everything you have in your billing system, you'll have in your operational data store for query. And they're like, really? And I was like, yeah, that's what we're going to do now. And I did that in 2003, 2004. Then I went on to Electronic Arts in late 2000 after Saudi Telecom, I went on to Orange Romania, before Electronic Arts. I went into Orange Romania, and the same thing. You know, what business requirements, interviews and functions do you need to do to understand what it is we need to put into the data warehouse? And the answer was, we don't need to do any of that. Why not? Because we're going to take everything. And they're like, how can you take everything? I said, just watch us. Just watch us. We'll do it. And they're like, okay. So your business requirements process wasn't about what data do you need because you're going to take everything. Your business requirements process came later about how are we going to exploit this data. And the business requirements interviews that we used and are still out there in the methodology documentation are really about where do you want to take your business into the future and what are the inhibitors you have that data could help resolve getting you where it is that you want to be. And the concept was called outstanding success. And I've done videos about this. I've done blog posts about all this stuff. I've been speaking about this stuff for decades, and it's a little bit like, you know, shouting into the madness, gentlemen, shouting to the wilderness. So anyhow, by 2003, it was take everything. Just take everything. You don't need to stop and think about what it is you're going to take. Take everything. Then, of course, down the track, you've got to figure out what key performance measures you're going to calculate and what metrics you're going to calculate. And you'll need the formulas provided by the business for those measures. But the business guys know how to calculate those things. It's not rocket science. They'll tell you how to do it. If they've got a set of metrics they want to implement, they'll tell you how to calculate it. It's not difficult. My job became, where I went to in that situation was my job became understanding the business well enough that I could go and interview the senior managers to get a feel for where it is they wanted to get to, then build them a system that would get them to where it is that they wanted to get to. That was my job. Like, interview these people, trying to figure out what it is they need. Why would I do that? And I'll give you an example, right, gentlemen? I'll give you an example. I was working for Vodafone Ghana in 2011. So Vodafone, everybody knows who Vodafone is. You'd have thought by 2011 they'd have figured out how to build a data warehouse by now, and they hadn't. And they were doing this job, and they'd spent a couple of $1 million in a year with Huawei. And why Vodafone possibly thought Huawei could build them a data warehouse. I have no idea. I mean, that was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard to that point in time, 2011. Huawei building a telco data warehouse for a Vodafone regional operating company? That's insane, gentlemen. Like, really, that's really insane. And so anyhow, the project failed and got canned, and I got called in to clean up the mess and help build the tender for the next project. And the CIO gave me a copy of the bid and said, could you look through this bid and tell me if we should have found anything in this tender document that would have warned us they didn't know what they were doing? And I said, sure. And I opened it up and I was flicking through it. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm looking for the project plan. And I found the project plans spread across 2 pages inside this tender document. I took one look at it. It had 8 weeks for ETL development. And I turned it around and held it up to the CIO. And I said, see where it says 8 weeks for ETL development? He goes, yeah. I said, that tells me these guys have absolutely no idea what it is that they're doing. And if you'd have given me a copy of this tender and let me look at it for 30 seconds like I just did, I'd have told you that for free a year ago. Don't buy from these guys, because 8 weeks ETL to build the ETL subsystem for a telephone company with 4 billing systems, because Vodafone Ghana had 4 billing systems. I said 8 weeks to build ETL for 4 billing systems. Anybody who tells you that has no idea what it is that they're doing, and you shouldn't buy anything from them. And he's like, really? I went, yes. You could have sent me this. I said to him, you could have sent me this tender and asked me to read it, and I'd have told you that for free. Because I don't like seeing all these failed projects. You know, I've been out there selling business intelligence projects for 30 years. Most of them fail, and my name gets tarred with the same brush as all these guys who sell all these failed projects. I was saying to him, so I don't like seeing a failed data warehouse project any more than the people who are losing money doing it. But, you know, I keep telling people, if you just ask me to help you, I'll help you make sure that your project is successful. You've got to pay me because it's business, but please ask me to help you, or I'm offering to help you. Please accept my offer to help you, because I don't like seeing these projects failing any more than you do. And he thought that was quite funny. So anyhow, there was a dispute between the CIO and myself in Vodafone Ghana about how we should frame the tender and the activities to be done by the people who respond to the tender. Now, I was brought in to write the tender, help write the tender, and it was going to go to the usual suspects, IBM, Teradata, Oracle, and one other. They hadn't figured out the fourth one they were going to give the tender to, but they were definitely going to give it to Teradata, IBM, and Oracle. And they said to me, we want you to define how this, how are we going to evaluate this thing, how are we going to present this to these tenderers, and how are we going to evaluate it, their responses. And the CIO said, we need them to follow a process of business requirements analysis and blah, blah, blah. And I said, hell no, we don't want to do that. The same sort of thing I'm saying now. And anyhow, we had this dispute. I explained what it is that he should do. He stood his ground. So we finished up in the office of the chief financial officer, because somebody has to resolve the dispute, right? And I'm the lowly consultant, and he's the CIO. He's the CIO of a Vodafone regional operating country in a country with more than 20 million people in it. He's an important guy. I'm just the paid by the day consultant, right? So we wind up in the chief financial officer's office, and we're having this meeting, and he's there to adjudicate on this sort of dispute. He's the boss of the CIO, of course. And so the CIO does his 10-minute pitch. This is what I think we should do. And the CFO looks at me, and he says, Mr. Nolan, may I call you Peter? And yeah, call me Peter. I said, Peter, how many telephone companies have you done? And I rattled them off. New Zealand Telecom, Telstra in Australia, Saudi Telecom, Mobile Telecom, Orange Romania twice, TalkTalk, SkyTalk were the ones that had been involved in directly. And I'd been involved in a number of telephone companies indirectly. And he looks at me and goes, that's quite a few telephone companies. I went, yeah, it is quite a few telephone companies. I spent a lot of time in telephone companies. He goes, you know a bit about telephone companies? I go, yeah, I know. I would argue I know a lot about telephone companies. He says, do you think you need to go to my business managers and ask them how to run a telephone company? I went, no. He said, what do you suggest? And I said to him, in bringing these models into the discussion, I said to him, you're the chief financial officer. He goes, yes. He said, my understanding and the contract I signed is that we cannot sell you our data. I said, I have a company where we sell telco data models. He goes, really? I said, yeah. And I signed a contract, and my understanding is I can't sell you those data models, and you're the chief financial officer. I'm just asking you, are you going to make sure that I honour that contract? You're not going to buy our data models off us. And he went, no, if you wrote it down in a contract, said you're involved in the tender process. We're not going to buy anything off you for the tender. Said you can't partner with anybody in the tender. I went, yeah, that's right. That's what I signed, and I certainly respect that and I understand that. And he goes, fine, I'm the CFO. No, you won't be able to do that. I said, good. I said, so what we have is we have a suite of data models that we've put into about 50 telephone companies. And, I would argue it covers 80 to 90% of what it is that you guys all want to do. And what I proposed we do is that we put together a document, kind of questionnaire, etc., and we get your people to tell us what it is they need out of this model and what it is that they don't want. And then we use that as input to go into the tender. So I don't need to go and ask your people what data they need. I already know what data they need. Now, maybe it's a little bit different down here in Ghana. Maybe here in Ghana, you're doing some things that I don't know about or I haven't seen before. I've never worked in Ghana before. Maybe there's something different here. And he goes, yeah, maybe, but really, it's a telephone company. And I said, yeah. And he goes, look, if you've done like 6 or 8 telephone companies and you've got a data model that you've put into 6 or 8 telephone companies, pretty sure it's going to do most of what we want. And I said, yeah, it's going to do most of what you want, but you can't buy it from us. You're going to buy one from somebody else. So what you want to do is you want to measure the quality of what it is you're buying from somebody else against what it is you already know works in other places. And he goes, you're making a whole lot of sense. I went, well, yes, I would be making a whole lot of sense, wouldn't I? So what we did was we put together a process and documentation, etc., and we went to 30 or 40 of the senior managers and their analysts, like the senior managers and the guys who dug around in data for them, and we walked them through how these things worked and all the rest of it, and then we said what we want you to do is score what are the things that you want out of this model and what are the things that you don't want and what's missing. What are the things that you're doing analytics on today or you're trying to do analytics on today but you can't and it's not in the model. And we went and did that. It only took 2 weeks and they came back and most of these guys were like, we are shocked that something like this even exists. We didn't know anything like this existed. And guess what they wanted, gentlemen? They wanted 100% of everything that was in our models. There was nothing left out, nothing there that was useless, according to them. And the area where we were weak was area of competitive information from outside the telephone company. And we went, well, yeah, we're weak on that area because we've never actually done that. And they go, yeah, well, we want stuff from outside the company. We want population figures. We want competitive information, what the other guys are selling. We want competitive information from the regulator, etc. We want that stuff as well. So, yeah, well, we've done warehouses with that sort of stuff, but, not usually for telephone companies. So I said, okay, let's add all that. So we added all that. So that's how useful those telco models were. Okay. So what were we doing? We were going into a company we did this at Talk. We went in and we said, we will take everything you've got. Anything that you point at that you say you think that sounds like a good idea of being in the warehouse, we'll put it in there. We were doing this during the early portion of the process. And they came back to us and they gave us the models. This is during the development process of the bid, right? They gave us the data models for their billing system, their customer management system, their CRM system, and their network automation interface control systems. And they said, you reckon you can do everything? Here's all the models and some sample data. Here's the models, fields, row numbers, all the stuff. You guys are so smart. This is Sean and I. He goes, you guys are so smart. You tell us, how much is it going to cost us to do all that? Right? Now, I won't tell you how much we told them, but we came up with what we called a variable fixed price. And the variable fixed price offer that we used to do was, we guarantee to deliver by this price. If we come under it, we'll give you your money back. But if we go over it, we'll cap it. And Talk were like, really? If you do better than what you estimate, you'll give our money back according to hours worked, etc. And if you go over, you'll eat it. And we went, yep. And you'll do everything. Everything in what we gave you will be in the data warehouse. We went, yep. Interdimensional model. Yep. And they're like, we don't believe a word you guys are saying. But, you're Sean Kelly and Peter Nolan. It's like, we don't believe a word you're saying, but we can't call you liars because look at your reputations. So Sean and I are sitting there going, we will stake our reputation on the fact that we can do this. And the guy that we were talking to, the main guy running the bid process, was Brian Ganley, and he was like, I admire your shots, pa. And we did. In the end, we did. In the end, gentlemen, we came in 150,000 British pounds under budget for the whole project, not just for our piece, but we had this whole project where we had to hire a bunch of people to do a bunch of work, and the whole project came in 150,000 British pounds under budget for the services component. So what did we do? We looked at all the data that was available to us. We looked at our models and we mapped them. And of course we have to extend the models to accommodate things that we didn't have in the models. But you look at all the data that you have in your operational systems that they want in the warehouse, and you look at your models and you map them. You don't go and ask people, what information do you want on your reports? Because if you've got everything in the data warehouse, you know damn well you've got all the information that they have on their reports. So during that project, gentlemen, what we were doing was, and this may sound unbelievable to you, right? What we were doing, once we'd mapped everything at the detailed level, and we had everything in the data warehouse at the detailed level in the test system, we were bringing the business users in to sit down with that data, writing queries with spreadsheets and all the rest of it, deriving the formulas for the calculations for the metrics that they wanted, etc., for things like revenue assurance and that, right? And I'd spend like 6 hours a day with one of the business people at a PC, writing queries, doing calculations on that data, and they'd be validating the calculations, etc., etc. And we get to the end of the day with the set of calculations we figured out that day, right? And I'd say to the business guys, okay, you have a good evening, see you in the morning. And we'd take those calculations, we'd write them into CTL, we would run the entire warehouse load process with those calculations built into them and build the test system again. Then I go home and get a few hours sleep, and we'd come back in the morning, and the business guy would sit there and he'd have the calculations in front of him. And I remember I was sitting at lunch one day, and one of the senior IT managers, the second in charge of IT at Talk, came along and said, I've heard on the grapevine that you guys are doing exactly what I just described. And we said, yeah, every night we rebuild the data warehouse if we need to do any changes to the underlying transactions, right? Every night we're rebuilding the data warehouse and rebuilding all these calculations so that the business users can come in the morning and on their test data see that the calculations are working. And she said, well, that's quite remarkable. And I said, yeah, it is, isn't it? Like, that is really remarkable that you can sit down during the day with business users in front of your warehouse coming up with the definitions of the formulas that they want and testing them and saying, okay, well, these are the formulas that we want to go into our measures tables, and then in the morning they're there. That is quite remarkable. And she's like, yeah, that is quite remarkable. So this is how we do it now. And she's like, I like it. I really like the process. I said, so do I. Works really well. That's why we're here. So, that was quite good. So how do we build data warehouses now, gentlemen? We have a suite of models, an extensive suite of models, and we have, operational systems that we may or may not have ever seen before. And we sit down and we map one to the other, and then we do all the metrics over the top. And we don't bother the business people with how to build their metrics until we've got the base layer built. And we build it so quickly, it doesn't take very long. A couple of months. Now it might be even faster, even for a large project. A couple of months. Okay? So, what I wanted to show you is, I'm going to show you some of these models, and there's more detailed presentations about it, but then, gentlemen, for the very first time, anywhere, ever, I'm going to give you a spreadsheet with a list of the tables in the BI4ALL base model. I'm going to give you the list of tables, okay? Like the actual list of tables from the BI4ALL base models. And we're going to do this through a demonstration so that you can see that everything that I've been telling you is not a bunch of what. You've got to keep it clean for business on YouTube, right? But I'm going to show you enough now in this demonstration that you know that I'm not talking through my where. So I'll hit pause and we'll go over to the demonstration. So here we are, just in one of my development servers. The BI4ALL 3000 model. So it's a little bit old. There's a bit been added since this. And 868 items. Now there's a few extras at the bottom in this one. Let me just go down. Oops. There's a few extras at the bottom. ZVM Day, AT, etc., etc. They don't count. So, 860 odd, 850 odd views. You can see that there are views, but we refer to them as table, right? So call it 850 because that's a nice round number, and it's just a shade under 30,000 fields. Okay, I'm going to prove that this is actually real. Okay, I can go into a view, and I can click on the view, and you can click on the columns. You can see the columns. They'll come up. Okay. Now this is not the Sybase IWS models. This was a new generation that Sean and I started building in 2006. Now there's some similarities between IWS, but what we did was we went back to the prior set of models, which were called Vertical Package Solutions. Finally remembered what that name was. We went back to the prior set of models, Vertical Package Solutions, and then we went forward from there so that there was no conflict with the Sybase IWS models. And there were some difficulties / issues with those models, and we solved all those. So if you are an end customer and the consultants pitching for your data warehousing deal don't have a suite of models of similar magnitude to this, And they say, well, what we need to do is build a customized suite of models for you because you're so unique and different to everybody else. Unless you're doing something like running nuclear power stations, you should tell them to get the hell out of your office because they should have a suite of models to work from, right? Whether you use our models or somebody else's models, the consultants that you hire to build your data warehouse should have a suite of models to start working from. They shouldn't say, well, you guys are so unique and different, we need to start from a blank sheet of paper and design you a U-Butte super duper wonderful set of data models from scratch in 2021. That shouldn't be happening, okay? That shouldn't be happening. So that's just to tell you they're real, they're there, they exist, and I'll just take you over and show you in the documentation database. In here we have tables, and in the tables you will see that there are actually keys marked. That's a key. And there's the referential integrity constraints placed in, etc., etc. Everybody who's used SQL Server Management Studio understands the little images there. Okay? So I want to take you over and show you the next thing. Here's a spreadsheet. You can see me logged in over here. This is a BI4ALL models spreadsheet 3101 version numbers. Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to scroll down. You know there's 860 odd tables. You can see here there is 33,248 lines in this spreadsheet. Okay? This is real. This works. You can have the software that does this for free on my website, right? The CTL software will build your tables for you, will build your indexes for you, will build your referential integrity constraints for you if you're crazy enough to want to use them, will build your views for you. We build all the objects for the data warehouse through these spreadsheets, gentlemen. And by building objects for the data warehouse through spreadsheets, we can do that about 5 times faster than what we could do it in Sybase Power Designer or any data modeling tool for that matter. Okay? So I would beseech you, gentlemen, please use these tools. They're free. Okay? Please use them. They're free. They will save you time and money. Okay? So there's workbooks for tables, there's workbooks for indexes, and this one is for views. Okay? 33,248 lines. And I'll scroll up to here. Inside this spreadsheet is everything you need to maintain your models. Okay, I'll just go up a few more. So you can see here in your view column definitions, you have your row type, the table owner, the table name. This is the underlying table name, the underlying column name, the view owner, the view name in language 1, the view column in language 1, the view column short help text in language 1, the view column long help text in language 1. Language 1 because you can build up to 10 models in 10 languages over the top of this underlying table and column. So we support producing the model in up to 10 languages from the one workbook. Okay? And you can understand this. I mean, anybody in data warehousing can understand table name, column name, or view name, column name with some description for your help text. Every field, gentlemen, every field, all 30,000 of them, got some form of description. Now, come on. Some of them, the description's not great. All right? But you try and sit there and put in descriptions for 30,000 columns and see how you go. Okay. So, yes, all 30,000 columns have some form of description in them. And as I said, about 850 tables. Now, this is how we maintain them. I actually maintain data warehouses, the views in data warehouses, and the tables, and the indexes, and the table spaces, and all the other stuff that goes along with it. I actually maintain them in spreadsheets. Why do I do that? Because it's faster and cheaper. That's why I do that. It's faster and cheaper. And you can have the exact same tools I use, and you will do it faster and cheaper too, once you learn how to use the tools. And for goodness sakes, you've just got to learn how to use a spreadsheet. It's not like it's a difficult tool to learn. How do we process this spreadsheet? Simple. We run this command, ctl console 3200. The file name is the spreadsheet. It's stored as an XML. It's an Excel spreadsheet stored as XML. That's all it is. And there's a log file name to give you messages. Run that, ctl console 320, and I'll just take you across. You see it's been running A102, process data models, and A101. This one's A101. This one's for the joins. Just type that in at the command. That command will open up the spreadsheet, process the data model, and give you your output. So what output does it give you? Here we are in the output folder. It gives us create constraints, create tables with select, create drop tables, drop table constraints. So if we put all the joins and all those sorts of things in there, it generates all the physical tables and constraints for us if we really want it to do that. Okay? If we want to maintain it as views, we've got data model views. It will create a database of physical tables that look just like the views, or it will create views over the tables you tell it to. Or we'll actually do both, and you decide what it is you're going to do with it. So I'm going to go to data model views. So just so you can see, 2021-03-15, which is today, 2:25 p.m. That was a little bit earlier today. You can see it's on the server IBI Dev 03, and I'm logged in as administrator. You can see the name of the spreadsheet file. Okay, and you can see the name of this file. So what this comment is telling you is this is the spreadsheet that I processed, and this is the version I used and the date and time I processed it. So you know this spreadsheet was processed on this date and time to produce this output. And you can see drop view, drop views. You can hit pause if you want, but you can see all these drop views. These are all the views. We'll scroll down. Lots of drop view statements. And then we'll come down to here. VM person. You can see it's table TD0100, and these are meaningless names from table TD0100, and then these are your meaningful names. So inside the spreadsheet there's a view VM person. These are the columns on VM person, and these make sense. Prefix, first name, second name, third name, suffix, address to name, email address, web address, tax number, government identifier, type with number, marital status, phone numbers. You recognize these things, gentlemen. Okay? You recognize them. These are normal. Now, I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom to show you that it's real. We'll click here, and we can go over, and we can see 34,936. You see this down the bottom right-hand corner? 34,936. That's how many lines of SQL is in this file, and it's all generated from the spreadsheet. So the tool that you do your data modeling in is called Excel, and it works really well, saves you a lot of time. Okay? All that is real. It's all there. It all works. So how do we build a data warehouse? We start, depending on what segment we're in, we start with a data model like this. That's our starting point. And we look at all the operational data we have and we say, wow, how do we map the operational data across to our models, and what updates we need to make to our models such that we take everything from the operational system with the some exceptions maybe. Now, in recent times, as this all moved to generating SQL in the ETL subsystems, we don't even do maybe anymore. We just take everything because there's just no point trying to figure out what should we leave behind. Like today, in 2021, you take SQL Server for example, the compression on SQL Server, you can have compression by index and by file underneath the tables. The compression is around 70-75%. So at the detailed level, you don't query the data at the detailed level that much. So why would you not take data and put it in there? Like really, why would you not take the data and put it in there? What kind of volumes are you dealing with that you can't put it into a database with 70 to 75% compression? So you would spend more time figuring out what not to put in there than it's worth, quite frankly. Okay? So that's how we do that. Now I'm going to take you across to a set of reports. Oh, sorry, before I go, one more thing. Joins. If you're going to have referential integrity constraints, you have to have joins defined. So we have another spreadsheet, beta model joins 3101. And you can see, well, it's pretty obvious that you've got a left table, left column, right table, right column. Scroll down to the bottom. We see we've got 5,267 lines in the joins spreadsheet. So this spreadsheet tells us the left-hand side join and the right-hand side join, which is basically your referential integrity constraint. The left-hand side joins are the fact tables, and the right-hand side joins are dimension tables and fact tables, because we do fact-to-fact table joins inside our models, right? So we have 5,267 joins defined in our models. Now I promised you I was going to show you the one and only new design idea that I came up with in this project, and I'll go across and do that now. And here we are, Peter's one big idea that he's been able to add to these data models in 20 years of using them. Check this out. This is a table called Party Dims ASOC. You can see there's a thing here called PKVF Party Dims ASOC, right? Got that? That primary key, you see this, gentlemen? That primary key was my idea. That was my big idea. This table, before I came along in early 2002, this table had that key on it. You'll notice the difference is that key is a varchar. And I said, flash of brilliance. I said, if you generate and put a primary key on here, something really cool will happen. Now notice down here, gentlemen, this is the party to the party dimensions association. So you have a party, and then you have all the attributes of party you want to archive over time. So this table implements Bill Inman's time variance and stability analysis model in a dimensional model. That's what this table is. Okay? So the guy who invented this table, which was not me, this was the Fred I mentioned, the guy who invented this table invented how do I archive data a la Bill Inman time variance and stability analysis models in a dimensional model. And he came up with this. And it works, by the way. So you have your party key, which obviously joins to the party, but all these other things like geography, demographics, language, professions, membership, blacklists, ethnic groups, credit ratings, value indexes, loyalty codes, blah, 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 blah. All that stuff is linked off to all those other tables. And if any of those keys change, you get a new record and you have a date from and a date to key and actual dates and a current flag. Time variant plus stability analysis implemented into a dimensional model. So we used to have this. Before I came along, we used to have this. And Peter's one big idea in 20 years of trying, because I can tell you I've tried really hard to come up with more ideas, was that integer key. I said to Fred, if we stick an integer key on the front of the association table, it had a different name in Sybase, but if we stick an integer key on the front of the association table, a really interesting thing happens. And he goes, what's that? And I say, let's do this. Let's look at response transaction. I say, you see here on this screen, it says VF customer DIMS ASOC. Well, the customer is a party. So that customer DIMS ASOC key points to that party DIMS ASOC table. And I said to Fred, if we take that integer key and we put it on the transactions, suddenly the transaction record is linked to every field on the association and every table of the association. So watch this, gentlemen. Watch this. VF customer DIMS ASOC. That's the association key that's going to be the current period key when this record gets laid down. That column there points to here. Points to here, this column. And by pointing to here, it makes available all these columns. And by the way, we can then go backwards and forwards through time. We don't just have to take the current view of the party. We can go backwards through time of what did the party look like at a certain point in time, even though this is what they look like at the current point in time. Suddenly, we could link to all these things, gentlemen, and given that we can link to all these things, we no longer need to remember what the model looks like. That was the purpose of the exercise. Remember? We got kicked out of our conference room into an open space area. We had nowhere to hang up all the diagrams for our models on the walls, and we were having dinner. And Fred, who was getting on in age, he was in his 50s. He's the same age as I am now, 20 years ago. He was saying, a bit older, but because he's a bit older, he's like 22 years older than me. So he was saying, I'm getting too old to remember all these things. And I said, what we need is a way of designing data models where we don't have to remember what they look like. That's what we need. And he said, yeah, that'd be great, but, how are we going to do that? And I said the next morning, after my bright idea that my brain thought of while I was asleep, hard-working me, my bright idea was, all we need to do, Fred, is add one integer key to the front of these association tables and take that integer key and put it on all the transactions. And then all the transactions are linked to that association table And we don't need to remember what the model looks like. And by the way, we don't just have one association table, we can have a number of them. We can have an association for party, we can have association for accounts, we can have associations for campaigns, we can have associations for anything. And we can take that one key and put it on the transactions, and then everything. I remember sitting in breakfast in the morning and I said, everything is linked to everything. And if it's not linked now, it can be linked real soon. And he just looked at me and said, that's a really good idea, Pete. And I went, thank you very much. One of the greatest compliments I was ever paid. And to give you an idea of just how good this was, gentlemen, and just how stunning it was, I'd done a company called Lindorf in Oslo in Norway. I went between Oslo and Bergen in Norway before I'd thought of this. We hadn't thought of this idea then. And I had a spare ticket to Bergen, and I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll go to Bergen and I'll catch the train from Bergen across to Stockholm, just to do that, because everyone says you've got to catch the train from Bergen to Stockholm because it's such a fantastic train trip. And the DBA for the project, the guy who ran the project, a guy called Bjorn, because everyone in Norway is called Bjorn, and I said to Bjorn, I'm coming to Bergen just on my holiday, and I'm going to take the train, but I've got an idea, and I want to show you this idea, and if you think it's a good idea, you can buy me lunch. So I just want to drop by your office for half an hour, I'll draw a diagram, show you an idea, and then we'll go to lunch. And if you like the idea, you can buy me lunch. I said to Bjorn, and he says, you're on. You did good work while you were here. If you've got something that you think is a new idea, I want to hear it. And so we organised the meeting for me to be there just before lunchtime, and I drew this picture for Bjorn about transactions, etc., etc. And he, of course, knew about this table we had implemented. Just go back here. We had implemented this table in his company, right? Without the key, without this integer. So he knew what this table was. They used it. They could only load it on a monthly basis. I also invented a way to load this table on a daily basis. So they had this table. He knew what it looked like. They loaded it on a monthly basis. And I talked about some of the policy records and some of the case records, etc., and the parties for the cases, etc. And I drew that diagram, a diagram that he was familiar with, because this is what the data warehouse looked like. And I said, now, imagine, if you will, we add an integer key to this association table. He goes, yes. I said, and imagine if we stick that key on every transaction table next to every customer key. And he looked at me and he went, oh my goodness, I'm buying you lobster for lunch. Literally, he looked at me and said, oh my goodness, I'm buying you lobster for lunch. He said, that is a really good idea. And it is. And he got it straight away. Straight away. As soon as he understood, I put an integer key on the association record, and I take that key and I put it everywhere. Everything's linked to everything. My goodness, I think I'll buy you lobster for lunch. And so back then, gentlemen, we used to call this everything is linked to everything. Today we call it the mesh. We just say there's a mesh of joins inside your data warehouse. You don't need to know what your data warehouse looks like. Like really, you do not need to know, you do not need to retain in your head any models or pictures of the data warehouse. You can be guaranteed that everything is linked to everything. There is a mesh, everything's connected, and if it's not connected, we are able to connect it really quickly for you. So you don't have to worry about that anymore. Think about that. So that's one of the things we do. This is how we build them now. Now the other tables we just have measures tables. And we'll just click on this measures table. And measures tables is where we put calculated columns. Okay, and measures tables can be simple measures tables, which are roll-ups of transactions, or they can be compound complex measures tables, which takes data from a variety of different places and puts all the measures from that variety of different places onto one table to make it easy to query. And those are where you need to sit down with the business guys and say, how do you calculate this number exactly? Because we need to replicate the calculation. And they'll tell you, because they're trying to do it today. And you might have a few things that you have to go backwards and forwards on, but that's fine. All right? So I wanted to show you that that's real. It's there, it's real. There's 850 tables and just shy of 30,000 fields. So if your vendor of business intelligence is coming along to you and saying, you guys are so different, so far out, we need to start with a blank sheet of paper for your data warehouse project, and we need to design and build you a data warehouse from scratch. But please, 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 don't be buying projects from these people. You're only going to regret it. And in buying projects from these people and having failures, you're giving people like me a bad name as well. And I'm pretty tired of having a bad name in this industry. Okay? I'd like to see more successful projects, please. Now the last thing I'm going to show you is what I'm going to give you. We have a suite of reports, of course, all downloadable, all published. If you're on SQL Server, it's your lucky day, right? So we have views, data model views. Sorry, here, data model view descriptions. I can click on there. I'm just going to go and run the report. And I have a spreadsheet called BI4ALL models. And I have V3101. Does this look familiar? Let's just go over here. BI4ALL models V3101. That's where this comes from. Okay. I can have up to 10 languages. I can select submodels. We have BI4ALL base, BI4ALL media, BI4ALL retail, BI4ALL telco, BI4ALL web. 4 submodels today. And building new submodels is not particularly difficult. So let's pick BI4ALL base. And I say, yes, I want to run that report. And I click View Report. It's going to run me this little report services report. And I'll just close this window. And I can drill down on language. And here is my report in Report Services. And I can scroll down in my report in Report Services. And you can see VF account close, VF account measure, VF account plan. You can see that in some cases this short description is indeed a little shorter than the long description. Some places it's the same description. Okay? But pretty quickly you can see one for the other. Now I can't give you this report linked into my server, but what I can give you is I can give you an Excel spreadsheet of this report. And that's what I'm going to do. Down below this video on the blog post there will be a button, Get Excel Spreadsheet, or Get BI4ALL Base Spreadsheet, something else like that. There'll be a button just down below that you can click on to download this spreadsheet. So you can go in and read all the table numbers and all the descriptions for the BI4ALL base models. This is what I'm publishing today for the very first time. You can go and read those things. And of course, there is another report, column descriptions, where you can drill down to the view. It'll show you the underlying tables, columns. This is an underlying table, column, view name, column name. You can have the data types there if you want them to. There's a little bit of extra work you need to do. And then you can have, this is a short, long name short, long description for the view, and these are the short, long descriptions for the columns. See that? So you can, through this reporting tool, get the spreadsheet loaded into the catalog, and you can have all that information inside your SQL Server reporting services. The entire model is there, gentlemen. So, just to summarize what it was I've told you in the last 1 hour and 15 minutes. I introduced this as, I was on a seminar this week and the presenter was saying we go to the business users and we interview the business users to find out what data they need, to know what tables to build, and to know what data to put into the data warehouse and all that sort of stuff. Very seriously, this person was saying this. And I'm sitting there going, we haven't done this for decades. Come on. We're not winning, are we? I'm sitting on this, watching this seminar going, we're just not winning, are we? So I thought, what the heck? I'll shoot a video and I'll just go through, this is how we do these things nowadays. And projects are much more likely to be successful if we do things, the best way that we know how to do them at the current point in time. And the best way we know how to do these things at the current point in time is we have an extensive model for a variety of industries. These ones happen to be telco, web, retail, and media. Okay, but we could build other models if we wanted to. It's not hard. We have a whole suite of models. We know we have operational systems. We can look at the operational systems, we can look at the suite of models, and we can say, okay, where do we need to take this stuff from the operational systems and put it into this model? Okay, and we can extend the model if we like. It's not like it's fixed. It's not a product with upgrades and things like that. We can extend the model, alter the model, change it, do what we like with it if we like. But we're going to take virtually all the data from the operational systems, we're going to put it into a suite of target models that we know work. We have a thing called the mesh, which will make sure everything's linked to everything. And we can run queries on it in fast databases now if we like. We can get compression if we need to at the detailed level, so we don't have to be worried about how much disk space we're using and all the rest of it. We can do all of that without worrying too much about bothering the business people about what it is that they need to see. And if we as the consultants don't have any idea about what it is that they need to see, then maybe we shouldn't be the consultants to these people. Okay? Just maybe. So the consultants, if you're an end customer who wants a data warehouse and wants something that's valuable and useful and will help you sustainably grow your profit over an extended period of time, then please make sure your consultants know about your business area, know and understand about what it is that you do, or if they don't, have some level of credibility that they can learn about your business in a relatively short time frame, can come in, do this sort of thing with a suite of models, with a cheap, fast, easy to use ETL tool like CTL. Hell, if you're a big company and you want to use DataStage or Informatica because we're a big company and we have to use a brand name ETL tool, then by all means migrate the CTL ETL across to your brand name ETL tool before you put it into production. That's easy. Okay, you can do that. That's easy. Okay, do all that, and then once you've got all that data into that nice new shiny data warehouse machine that runs really quickly, you can go through and you can define all the calculations that you need to put into your measures tables, and you can start building those measures tables. Okay? And gentlemen, that's how you do your data warehousing today. And that shouldn't take you, quite literally, that shouldn't take you any more than 5 months in a massive, massive, massive company. That shouldn't take you any more than 5 months. Really, it shouldn't take you any more than 4 months, but it shouldn't take you any more than 5 months. And how many people do you need to build that thing? 2 or 3. 3 if you want somebody doing the reports during the process of building. Gentlemen, it takes literally 2 people to take one of these models and build yourself a data warehouse based on those models within 4 or 5 months. For a massive company, it takes 2 people. One person is the person who's doing the mappings, and the other person is the person who's building the physical database. And he's the mapping, it used to be he's the mapping person in training. Now, one of the reasons that CTL hasn't been widely adopted is that we nearly sold this thing to Infosys at one stage. We nearly sold CTL and the model, Sean and I, to Infosys until some bright spark at Infosys realized how much revenue they would lose by moving to this technology if they weren't able to convince the customers to keep paying on kind of a fixed price basis. Because they realized, whoa, hang on a minute, this is going to make our data warehousing projects way, way, way cheaper to deliver, and our customers are going to push us down on price. So we're going to we'll increase our margin, but we'll lose some revenue, and revenue counts. So we were nearly to the end of the close, and some bright spark in Infosys realized, oh, we're going to give up some revenue if we take these products on. Yeah, we can charge more and make more margin, but we'll give up some revenue. And the deal went away. So if you are an end user customer, if you're a customer, a company building data warehouses, or you've got vendors in building data warehouses and they're not using CTL, you should ask them why. Because even if they go into production with Informatica or Data Stage, it's cheaper to build the mappings using CTL and then convert it to Data Stage at the end. If somebody's telling you we're the experts in data warehousing in your area and they don't have a suite of models for your industry area, you should be asking them, why don't you have a suite of models in our industry area? Why don't you have a suite of applications in our industry area? It's 2021, for goodness sake. How long have you been doing this? Peter Andrew Nolan's got this stuff. Why don't you? Could be asking those questions, gentlemen. Okay? Could be asking those questions. So that's what I wanted to show you. Obviously, I'm giving you the table names for the BI4ALL base models. Obviously, I can give you the table names for telco, web, and retail. Obviously, I can actually give you the underlying data models. And I guess if some of you people who listen to this audio and go, hey, this looks pretty interesting, we want to take a closer look into the model side of things, I'll do a deal, make an offer, or we'll do a deal for the first few to get underway. Okay? Now also, if you don't want to buy these things from me because of my political persecution, you can buy these things from somebody else. Okay? I have resellers of these things. You can buy these things from somebody else, but we'll make you a good offer. For the first few who come along, we'll make you a good offer. Alright? Or you make us an offer. Tell us what you think this is worth. We know how much it's worth. I was selling these things like hotcakes at $150,000 a copy. Okay? In the zeros, 20 years ago, we were selling these data models at $150,000 a copy, and we were selling them like hotcakes to the big companies. So that's we know how much they're worth. Now, today, I'm a little bit more in need. Maybe we'll ask for a more reasonable price. But make us an offer. Go through, make us an offer. Have a look. One of the jokes that Sean Kelly and I used to have is we could publish these models on the web. Nobody would be able to figure out how to load them. And I think that's substantially true even today. Substantially true even today. So that's what I wanted to show you, gentlemen. As I said, the spreadsheet will be down below. I'll have other buttons, other documents down below, more information. There is a ton of information on my website about these models and how they work and all the rest of it. People haven't been so interested. But maybe, just maybe, now that people are talking about or continuing to talk about the process of building data warehouses, which is so outdated and so old, maybe, just maybe, people might start listening to me and building data warehouses a little more successfully than what they've done in the past. And one thing I will say, gentlemen, is I've been doing this for 30 years. Yeah, my first project was a dog's breakfast for the first 3 months. Okay. In my very first project I started 30 years ago, what did I do? I built the data warehouse as a third normal form data warehouse because, third normal form was how to build data warehouses, right? And it didn't work, and it was too expensive to run. And I spent the next 3 months from July through September inventing a new way of storing data to get the performance that we needed, the multi-level summary method I invented way back in 1991. Now, Ralph Kimball had beaten me to it, but I had no knowledge of what Ralph had done with multi-level summaries when I invented multi-level summaries. In fact, I had no knowledge of star schemas when I was doing this development job. I was reading in the Metaphor documentation about star schemas, but that looked like crazy stuff to me, and we didn't build data warehouses like that. We didn't know how to build a star schema. We didn't think it was sensible. That looked like crazy talk to us, so we built a third normal form data warehouse, because obviously that was the way to go in 1991. Okay? So, this, gentlemen, is how to build state-of-the-art data warehouses. Yes, my first one was a dog's breakfast, but since then, I haven't had a failed project. Or caveat, I haven't had a failed project where the customer took my advice. I have had failed projects where the customer said, thanks very much for all your good advice, Pete, but we're not going to take it and we're going to get rid of you, and their project failed. That has happened over the last 30 years, gentlemen. I can assure you that has happened. But on projects where I've run the project and the customer has taken my advice and implemented my advice into production, I haven't had one single failure in 30 years. I would hope that counts for something. Okay? And on my blog site, I have a number of blogs talking about the value that's been generated out of the data warehouses that I've implemented, because the whole time that I've been working in the data warehousing area, my focus has been on how do we make more money, how do we sell more stuff using the information that we have available to us that's been collected by all these wonderful operational systems that we've been implementing. That has been my focus. And because my focus has been on how do we make more money rather than, how do we do a nice dashboard, my customers make more money. That's how that goes. And some of my customers make a lot more money. Like one of the banks that I gave advice to on multi-level summaries in Australia way back in 1993 made an extra, over the years, improved their business to be making an extra $1 billion profit a year through differentiated customer service levels and managing customer lifecycle and looking at customer 360. They were doing that 25 years ago. They were making an extra $1 billion a year because of what I showed them. One of the other projects I can talk about now because it's so long ago, richest man in Australia, Kerry Packer. I was the guy who created the data warehouse to figure out how to turn around one of his failing companies, and we doubled the gross profit inside 2 years. Those are the sort of projects that I was doing in the 90s, gentlemen. Turning around, doubling the profit of one of the big 4 banks in Australia, doubling the profit of one of the companies owned by the richest man in the country. And obviously the richest man in the country can hire any damn consultant he pleases. His problem was he told the people in his company, fix this problem, and nobody could figure out how to fix that problem until yours truly came along. And I was the guy who fixed the problem. By the way, in that particular case, and it's on my blog, I didn't actually come up with the idea. The idea was already floating around inside the company. There was a woman inside the company that had pushed this idea many, many, many times previously, but nobody could answer the question, did her idea have merit? I was the guy who built the data warehouse to test the question, did her idea have merit? And it did, and that pretty much doubled the profit of the company. So, gentlemen, if you would like a successful data warehouse project, please, by all means, get in touch with me. I'd be really happy to help you have your data warehouse project be successful. And if it is successful, you can go and tell people how it was successful and why it was successful. Okay? But goodness me, please, don't be giving business to consultants who say, what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to do a business requirements analysis with your business users to understand how it is to understand what data you need in your data warehouse and what data you need on your reports. Please don't be giving business to these guys. Like, please, just don't do it. Unless you're in a business area so unique, so unusual that there's just nobody else around like you, so there's no possibility that you could get some leverage from other projects. Okay? And the example that I thought of is you're running a nuclear power station or something. There's just not that many of you who have nuclear power station data warehouses, I guess. Okay? And yes, this is presented with a little humor and a little lightheartedness. Okay? But at the end of the day, I want to see more successful data warehouse projects. I would love to see more successful data warehouse projects returning large returns on investments, and I'd like to see an end to all these failures, gentlemen. That would be nice. All right? Now with that, I shall say thank you very much for listening, and bye for now.